Hello, and welcome to Pivotal Moments, a podcast sharing, exploring, and celebrating stories of change, big or small. We are all agents of change and have the power to pivot at any point, at any time. I'm your host, Melissa Robena, along with my co-host, Siria Gutierrez. On this episode, we continue with our discussion on the types of pivots we make. Today, we will explore life-changing events. Now, when we talk about life-changing events, I mean, who hasn't experienced it? I mean, we're living in a life-changing event right now.
Well, we totally are. And it's interesting because as I was looking into this topic, I thought, well, I haven't really been through any of these life-changing events. I looked up the most stressful life events that you can have, and I don't check any of those marks. But then when you're like, hey, we're going through the Rona right now, I was like, oh.
I don't know if you've forgotten, but there's this thing called a pandemic happening right now.
Oh, I totally forgot about that. But yes, so the pandemic, I have now been through a life-changing event.
I'm glad you can, check that off your bucket list. But I mean, it goes to show that life-changing events affect us all, and that they can actually be, good or bad. I mean, through the pandemic, look at us. We have taken the time to kind of channel our energy into building this podcast. And so for me, that's a positive. But then, others, I know several people who have lost their jobs as a result of the same life-changing event. So it really could go either way.
Right. You can definitely go one of two directions with this. And I think that part of perhaps why it didn't pop into my head as a life-changing event is we're still going through it. And as I've been reflecting on pivotal moments, what that means and how that plays into my life, I just think it's really something that you need to see in hindsight. In hindsight, I think we're all going to say, yes, this was an event that, what were you doing during the Rona will be a thing. Just like where were you during 9/11 for our generation, right? We're going to have those things, but really you need that time to be able to use the benefit of hindsight to say how it has impacted you. At this point, I don't know exactly. I can tell you I'm definitely a different person and have different goals as a result of the pandemic, but that is still something that is evolving. And a year from now, I think, we'll probably have the same discussion of, hey, how did this actually affect us? Because hopefully by then, crossing our fingers,
crossed,
we will be on the other side of this.
Well, we talk on this podcast a lot about mindfulness. And so when I was thinking about life-changing events, I was thinking more of like even the emotional component of how does this make me feel? And in doing my research, I think you had mentioned a little bit in episode 5 when you were talking about the mental shortcuts that our brain automatically creates. When we're children, we learn how to tie shoes, and then boom, we don't even have to think about it when it comes to tying our shoes. But, so our brain likes routine. It loves
routine.
It does. It loves routine. So any change that happens, whether it's good or bad, our primitive brain actually interprets that as like an evolutionary threat. And
it pushes against it, right?
It does. It feels uncomfortable.
Well, and that's the whole thing with change overall. Your brain and your body, like that's why when people are trying to lose weight, like they may settle at a certain comfortable weight because of homeostasis. That's what that is. Like our brain wants to stay the same. Our body wants to stay the same. They don't actually like these dramatic changes, but you have to be persistent enough to keep going, and then you'll actually make those changes that you want.
Oh, absolutely. So coming back to the life-changing event of the pandemic, I don't think many of us, we have to just go in reaction mode. For those that have lost their job, they're trying to figure out, okay, what's my next step? But when have we really taken the time to just stop and reflect and think about how this life-changing event is impacting our thoughts, our emotions, our communication strategies? And for me, I know we probably won't really know the entire outcome or impact this has on us until it is over. But for me, I was just trying to think, especially since we talk about mindfulness a lot in this podcast, I was like, how does this make me feel right now in this moment?
Well, how does it make you feel right now?
Of course, I've actually found, that I miss people, which For my introvertedness, that is completely goes against what I normally do, but I crave it. But I've been trying to use this time to heal and reflect and just sit with my thoughts. And
what about your driving yesterday? How's that?
oh, that was okay. So, dear listeners, yesterday I drove for the first time in a month.
Yeah.
And I
can't believe that you haven't been driving this whole time. I've been driving at
least
to the grocery store.
But you still go to work. I work from home.
I know. Mm-hmm.
And I have a house husband. If you do not have a house husband, you must get one. And so I haven't had to worry about groceries, laundry, anything. I'm somewhat spoiled.
Somewhat? Somewhat? Okay.
But I mean, so I was driving to a wedding yesterday, and it almost felt like I was a teenager again, trying to relearn how to drive. It was an odd and surreal experience.
Were you more focused on the road and like putting your hands up? And
no, I quickly zoomed it. I drive a Mazda, so I quickly, was back to my, drive it like you stole it ways. So it didn't take me long, but it was
you weren't too heavy on the brake or anything like that?
What's a brake?
Oh, okay. That explains it. Yeah.
So how has it made you feel?
It's made me feel all kinds of things, but so the experience of driving, like I got to driving much sooner than you did because we opened up back on June 1st. And before that, I was still driving to the grocery store. I'd kind of find an excuse to go out because I was completely by myself all day. Like, my partner would leave at 5, 6 in the morning, like he usually does, and not come back until the time he usually does, which is the 6 or 7 at night. Well, when I'm doing the same thing, you don't notice it. But when you're home by yourself all day, only your plants to keep you company, you notice these things. So yes, I kind of became a bit of a plant lady during this time period. But I think how it's made me feel is it's made me feel everything. There are days where I feel really hopeful for humanity and I see people caring and,
being mindful of the environment and
like, oh, look at these good things that are happening from the pandemic, right? I've become closer to some friends that I wasn't necessarily as close to, and I think we even talked about that last week after we had been recording. Like, this gave us an opportunity where we saw each other every day, but we weren't necessarily communicating every day. And now we have this deeper connection. I love you.
I heart you too, Bobo.
But sometimes I want to strangle her. No joke. It's just sometimes. But anyways.
I don't know. I could not understand why.
So there's definitely been those kinds of things. And then other times where I just spend so much time going down the rabbit hole of the updates and what's going on in the world where I just have to step back. And I think what I've realized about myself is that I'm much more of an empath than I thought I was. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds like really out there, with crystals and
you are wearing a crystal today.
I am wearing a crystal. I brought my protection beads and, there are certain things that are happening. I've also made it into witch TikTok. So I think that's part of it. But anyways, I think knowing that, hey, I really feel when I see these different things and it impacts me on such a great level is where I have to limit my exposure to these things. And so and again, that goes to being mindful, right? If I know, hey, right now there's some negative energy here, or there's just something that's off, I need to find a way to get myself into a better spot. So I think it's helped me with the mindfulness and being careful, because you have to be careful about everything, right?
Welcome back. So, Siria, in the last segment, you mentioned a list of life-changing events. What is that?
Yes. So the list of things that I have not been through, audience, is it's interesting because there were a couple of different variations. So there was a list of 10 events, and then there was another resource that had another event that I was like, you know what, that seems like it would be a stressful life event. So that's kind of where these are talking about, because I was trying to find a universal list of big changes that we have, and I couldn't quite find that. But this was the 10 most stressful life events: the death of a loved one, or more specifically, the death of a spouse. That's definitely a stressful event. Divorce or separation. Getting married made every single list.
Well, I would hope so.
Yeah. So, starting a new job, that's one of the most stressful events. Work stressors, I think I've had those to a certain degree. Financial problems, those can cause a lot of stress. Moving to a new home, I've moved, but not that whole production of moving into a new
finding
house.
a home and
going through all of that. Then there was at this point I'm at number 8, chronic illness or injury, which is an area that I deal with a lot, but I don't personally have chronic illness or injury. Then retirement was a stressful life event, and then transitioning to adulthood, which we've kind of touched on before. The add-on that I thought was important to add on here was going to jail or prison. Those can be life stressful events that we generally, people are going to go through some of these life events. So I was just trying to find those things that were universal. I think at this point we all have going through the Rona in common.
Oh, absolutely. And I know that the list that you provided had a lot of life-changing events that cause stress. And in my research, life-changing events falls into one of two categories. One, it can be unintentional or forced, the death of a loved one, specifically a spouse. But then some of it can also be intentional. And I think you had mentioned career change, but so these are things that we're choosing to do. Career changing, maybe deciding to go back to school, getting married. It is stressful, but it is an intentional choice, hopefully. But, so it can fall into one of those two categories. But I think anything on that list definitely can be stress inducing, but it can also be an exciting point, right? Getting married or, changing jobs.
They definitely can be exciting. I don't know how you make the death of your spouse exciting.
No, I didn't say everything
unless you were planning.
And then they're also going to jail, so they're ticking off 2 things off that bucket list.
There you go. But yes, no, I understand what you're saying. There's definitely opportunity to find some joy in some of these items, but it was just like, wow, there's a lot of different things that just because I haven't gone through them yet doesn't mean I won't. My parents will pass away, right? I've given Matt specific instructions that he has to die first. I don't know that he's going to listen.
He is pretty stubborn.
But starting a new job, I've done those things. And financial problems, sure, definitely when I had my student loans, that was something that was more at the forefront of my mind. But just knowing, okay, there are a lot of different events that we're all going to go through. And really, when we think about how is this event going to impact me? So if I think about, my parents passing away, okay, I know I'm going to have an emotional reaction to that. And just even thinking about that, or thinking about that loss of Matt, any of those things, those are really going to, drain me and just say, this is the worst thing ever. I can't imagine anything worse. And so what's interesting about that, though, is that we're actually really bad as a species at predicting how we're going to feel or how things are going to make us feel. And that's actually called impact bias. So oftentimes when we're catastrophizing, this is the worst thing ever, and, I can't possibly come out of this. What the studies have shown is actually you would be okay. You would get back to some sort of equilibrium, and you might even be happier overall, even if you had a devastating life event happen to you.
That's very interesting. Okay, this is joking, but it's, I always tell my husband, he's like, you can't live without me. And I was like, well, actually I could. I mean, of course, I'd be heartbroken, but I eventually, life goes on and you learn to develop a new quote unquote normal. So I would develop a new normal in a new life without him. That's not to say that I can't carry a piece of him with me in my heart, right? Or in my thoughts or memories. But you do. Your body goes back to developing that normal because it needs to have that normalcy. You can't sit there and wallow in grief. Your body wants to move forward.
Mm-hmm. It absolutely does want to move forward, but I think it's just part of it is we think, okay, achieving this next job or achieving, getting my PhD, getting 6-figure salary, whatever it is. We always think that next thing, that is what's going to make us happy. That is what's going to be the game changer for us. And it could be for some things, but what they've gone back to again and again is that we're really bad at predicting what's going to make us happy. And then actually what makes us happy are things that we do on a regular basis and that are things that you've figured out how to be mindful of and enjoy in that moment. And so they did, so in 1978, these researchers out of Northwestern and University of Massachusetts, they wanted to study the happiness of recent lottery winners and people who had recently become paraplegic or quadriplegic. And so what they found was, immediately following the events, their levels of happiness were, one was very high. I'll let you guess who that was. The lottery winners, and the people who had suffered the injuries, they were much lower. But then when they went back and measured their happiness, they balanced out again. So the lottery winners, their happiness levels went down, and the quadriplegic, paraplegic people, their level of happiness went up again, because they were focusing on getting pleasure from everyday activities, whether that was talking with a friend, watching TV, eating breakfast, like all of these things, laughing, receiving a compliment, just focusing more on those little things throughout your day. That's really what is going to give you that happiness as you're moving forward. And so, we think, yes, these other things, they're going to make us happy. It's like, they might make you happy for a little bit. And that's kind of the problem that impulse shoppers have, right? And I've definitely had my bouts of being an impulse shopper.
You think?
Yes, a lot. So it might make me happy in that moment, but long term, you get used to it. And you're like, all right, whatever, that didn't make me as happy as I thought it was going to.
As you were talking, it reminded me of a TED Talk video I watched with Sean Aker. And I can't remember. I think it's called Happiness at Work. I definitely recommend Googling it. It's about a 20-minute video, but he fills it with jokes and you're laughing the entire time. But as you're talking about happiness, we always talk about, well, when we get that next job, when I make these 6 figures, then I'll be happy. But that's really not what you do. Is when you get that job, now you got to find a better job. If you get this salary, then you got to make a better salary. So we're always moving that goalpost without ever really just sitting in the moment like, wow, I am in this career. This is really exciting. I never thought I'd be here. And stopping and pausing for a second just to celebrate the milestone that you've achieved. And I think that we, as like you said, we're really bad about doing that because we are constantly looking at the next goalpost without really stopping to think like, wow, look how far I've come.
Well, it's two things, right? One is we're not reflecting and celebrating as we go, right? Mm-hmm. That's one thing. The other thing is that our body actually adapts. So you know how excuse me, you may have had this experience, maybe not, where you open up a box of Girl Scout cookies. Okay. Melissa used to be a Girl Scout cookie leader.
I was a Girl Scout first of all, and then I became a leader.
Okay. She used to
so my garage was full of cases of cookies. Okay.
So the first case at the beginning of cookie season, and you open up that first box. What's your favorite box?
The lemonades.
The lemonades? Ugh, I'm judging you a lot. Okay.
Or Thin Mints. I don't know. I'm like non-discriminatory when it comes to it.
Let's go with Thin Mints. Let's go with a good one. So Thin Mints, okay? You open up that first box of the season. You open up the Thin Mints.
That fresh smell of mint.
Yes, it just, mint and chocolate and all of that deliciousness. And you take that bite of that first cookie. That first cookie is going to be absolutely delicious. But then if you do what some people may do, myself included, then you go and you eat another cookie.
Eat the sleeve. Let's be real. You eat the sleeve.
Little by little, the more cookies you eat, the less enjoyable the process becomes. Nothing is going to be as good as that first cookie because we adapt, right? So you actually need to space out some of those things that you really like, because the more you make them a part of your regular life, the more your body adapts, and no longer is that delicious Thin Mint cookie giving you the same pleasure it did at the beginning of the season. By the time you're in your 4th or 5th box in a season, if you've gone that far down the road, you like them, but now it's become a habit that you just want to eat them. You're not actually savoring and
enjoying the flavor. Makes a lot of sense. So I think what I can take away from this is that we need to, stop and celebrate these milestones, because after I watched that TED Talk video, I, just was like, wow, I do that. Great. I have a job. Now I need a better job. I've hit this sales mark. Okay, now I need to hit the next sales mark, without stopping to say, wow, Melissa, look how far you've come from starting off as a social media marketing specialist to the COO of a company.
You're a bad bitch.
That's right. Welcome back. So Cydia, thank you for sharing that list of life-changing events. And, in looking back, what's unique about this? Not everybody is going to experience a death of a spouse or having kids or going to jail. But looking at the pandemic, this is something that touches us all in one way or another.
Globally, right?
Absolutely, globally. And so how rare is it for, as a species, for us to experience a life-changing event collectively together at the same time? It's, I know I touched on 9/11, right? Mm-hmm. 9/11 was very much an American experience. Mm-hmm. It was heard everywhere, but it wasn't something that everybody felt. And New Yorkers felt it even more strongly than we did on the West Coast, right? It's like I was in San Jose. So even though it was something that as Americans, yes, this is an event that impacted us, it didn't impact us the same way. And you're absolutely right. With the coronavirus, it has not impacted us all the same way, but it has impacted all of us. In some capacity, big or small, whether it was the death of a loved one, the loss of a job, the having to wear a mask to the store. So whether it's been
having to wear a mask to school, having to go to school online, there are just so many different ways that this has impacted us. And we just don't know yet, I think, what all the ramifications are going to be. But listeners, have you taken time to reflect on that pandemic and its impact on you? Have you experienced a time where things turned out better than you have imagined? Could the coronavirus be one of those times?
Who knows?
Who knows? Let us know at facebook.com/pivotalmomentshq. We are so excited about our upcoming episodes. We have a special recap reflection episode coming up. We have interviews with people all over the world, so stay tuned. We once again want to thank our producer and music director, Ron Johnson. This has been an Astronomicus DMR production. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late and you're right on time.